start in Isaiah chapter 15 and verse 8. And more as a background, chapter 15 itself is dealing with the burden of Moab, as I described it. In the first verse, he sets forth the burden of Moab, but Isaiah is listing several of Moab's cities and the desolation that's coming upon them, and thus the people's desperation and fleeing. So in verse 8 we get to, "For the cry is gone round about the borders of Moab, the howling thereof unto Eglaim, and the howling thereof unto Berelium." So here's a cry of sorrow, has become such and so great that it goes throughout the entire land. It's not limited to one area or one location, but it's gone round about the borders, just everywhere within the land. So the whole nation is weeping, howling, crying with distress that has come upon them. The cities that are mentioned here, Eglaim and Berelium, we don't really know where they're located. So some, and it would seem to be sensible to me at least, believe that they were toward the south. Others, of course, go the opposite way, believe that they were toward the north. Doesn't really matter. Isaiah is just showing the extent of the howling and the crying that's taking place, whether these cities be the north or the south. And I say, to me, it makes sense being at the south from the standpoint, which way is the army going to be coming from that's causing this howling and weeping? You got four choices. From the north. There you go. Now, why do we say that? Because the nation probably that's dealing with this is probably Assyria, and they are north, and they're going to be coming toward the south. So the howling that maybe begins at the north goes all the way to the south, is what I would think. But either way, Isaiah is simply showing the extent of it. It is.
So logically, since they're coming from the north, they can be running south. The people that are fleeing for their lives, that'd be the logical choice.
That's what I was saying. Others say that the cities were probably in the north, though, so you can find either way. And that's why I started out with, we don't know. But to me, it seems logical that they would be at the south. And that's simply to me and my feeble opinion, which, with about $4 or $5 or maybe $10, you can get you a cup of coffee. Verse 9 then, "For the waters of Diamond shall be full of blood, for I will bring more upon Diamond, lions upon him that escapeth of Moab, and upon the remnant of the land. So, diamond, as it's spelled here, is the same as in verse 2 of Dibon. So it's the same thing, just spelled a little bit different. Probably to make a play on words. That, of course, when you make a play on words in one language, if you translate it into another language, guess what? It doesn't work, does it? Well, we don't see it thus, but there's probably a play on words here. When it talks about the shall be full of blood, the word blood here is from the Hebrew word dam, D-A-M. Thus, the waters of Dimon, from changing the D-I-B-O-N to D-I-M-O-N, to make a play on the words of the city and the being full of blood. This refers to the river Arnon.
On D-Day, they said the ocean was full of blood.
The ocean was full of blood on D-Day.
So it was a lot of it there, but it wasn't the whole ocean.
Not the whole ocean, but probably toward the shores, it would have been filled with blood because of the bloodshed that would have been there. Well, here, the river is being filled with blood of the Moabites. Go back to the preceding verse and the crying and the howling that's there. Well, they're being killed. They're being destroyed. But here, it talks about lions upon him that escapeth of Moab. So he's in the latter part, he's dealing with, here's those who have escaped the destruction that's come, but there's going to be more coming, additional calamities. We might say the remnant of the land. Since we're familiar with the remnant, well, the remnant of Moab are going to have more distress coming upon them. The lions that are mentioned here, and it's interesting, just notice the plural lions and not lion. It probably has reference to Nebuchadnezzar. But because of the plural, it might also refer to, or it might include the Persians who will come after the Babylonians. So you have the Assyrians attacking now, but then those who escape that, don't worry, Babylon's going to come, and Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to make a greater destruction. And then after that, the Persians are going to come. So it's basically one after another that he's dealing with to try and show there's going to be total destruction. And while the rivers are flowing with blood now because of the great destruction, those that should have happened to escape, there's more coming and greater destruction coming. So not a pretty picture for the Moabites in this. Chapter 16 then. We're going to start in this section, the verses 1 through 5. The exhortation of Moab to join with Judah, is the way I entitled this section of verses 1 through 5. And he tells them, "Send ye the lamb to the rulers of the land, from Selah to the wilderness, unto the mount of the daughters of Zion." So here Isaiah, or the prophet, is giving advice to the Moabites. Think of our nation or other nations. When you get advice from another nation, let's just say here we are, United States of America, and let's say someone over here in Mexico is going to give us advice. Or maybe in Venezuela, they're going to give us advice. Well, that's what I was thinking, actually, in economics especially. How much weight do we attribute to the advice that we get from foreign nations? We don't give too much weight to that, do we? Well, now then, the prophet from Judah is giving advice to the Moabites. They need to listen. Will they? Well, probably not too much. But he advises them to send tribute of lambs to Judah. Someone turn over to 2 Kings chapter 3 and read verses 4 and 5 for us. 2 Kings 3 and verses 4 and 5.
Elisha, king of Moab, was a sheep master, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams with the wool. But it came to pass when Ahab was dead that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel.
Point is, they had in the past sent tribute of lambs, along with rams here, along with the wool, to Israel. So they've done this in the past, and now then Isaiah is saying you need to do it again. Take the scenario that I was talking about just a moment ago, and someone from a foreign nation giving the United States advice and saying, y'all need to send taxes to us. Well, no, we don't pay taxes to them. No, we don't pay taxes to the United Nations even. We pay taxes to the United States. The United States might take that money and give it to nations, including the United Nations, but we don't pay taxes to them. This is, you pay taxes to, or tribute, as they would call.
We have some kind of fee for membership.
With United Nations, we do have there is a fee for membership, but that is paying a fee, not taxes. This is a tax. That's what tribute is, and he's saying you need to do this again. You paid tribute in the past. You paid these taxes in the past. You need to pay it now. The purpose of it, at least on this occasion, was that Moab would be pleading for Judah's help. It would be from Selah, which is the capital of Edom, probably because that's the main place in which the people would have taken refuge. And again, transporting our minds back into that time frame, you had the fortified cities. What if you didn't live in the fortified city and there's a nation coming against you? What do? Run to the fortified city. And you're not going to go to the weakest fortified city, are you? You're going to go to the one that's going to be the most fortified, which would be the capital city in all probability, as far as a nation is concerned. And so here you have the same thing. And he's telling them, you need to be sending tribute to Judah for Judah's help. Now, in that time frame, the giving of tribute or sending tribute to another nation was generally because that nation had conquered you and you were thus paying tribute to them. Another reason was that if you were afraid of some nation and you wanted help from some other nation, you would send them the tribute to come and help you in defense of your city or your nation to defeat this other nation. So that's basically what he's saying you need to do, you at Moab need to do in relationship to Judah. In verse 2 then, he adds, for it shall be that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon. This is a picture of the people of Moab gathering at the fords of Arnon, the river Arnon. The question about this is, why are they there? Now, there's three answers that are really given as to why they were there. Three different answers. It's not three reasons. One answer is that they have regained their confidence and they're about to return to the land. So they're gathering at this point. They've now got their confidence back and they're going to go back and take over the land, defeat the enemy. That view I personally find unlikely. But that is one of the three reasons. A second reason is that it's their condition as they flee the land. That would make a little bit more sense, that they're fleeing the land. They gather there in order to leave together as a group, you might say. Dale?
Think maybe the water would be higher at some points, and they're waiting until the water diminishes so they can cross easier? Are they trying to make some kind of...
Well, since we don't know the time of the year, there's obviously rivers rise and fall. That really is not set forth, as far as I know, as one of the reasons that they are gathering there. It could be a shallow place where they could cross. So that is a possibility that they're fleeing the land. And so they've come to this place where they could cross over and leave. The third reason that I kind of think would lean toward is that they're gathering there to make a petition to Judah. What did the prophet just say in verse 1? Pay tribute to Judah. Send the lambs to the ruler, to Judah. Now then, what do we see? They're gathering there at the fords of Arnon for that purpose. To me, it fits the context better. Does that mean necessarily that that's the correct answer? Well, all three of these are given as far as the right answer as to why they're gathered there. I say, to me. And with your $10, you can go buy you a cup of coffee again. You can, but to me, it fits context. So in verse 3, take counsel, execute judgment, make thy shadow as the night in the midst of the noonday, hide the outcast, bewray not him that wandereth. Isaiah in this is telling Moab the words to use in its plea to Judah for shelter, for protection by Judah. And Moab is asking Judah for advice and to do or to execute the decisions that have been made. Take counsel. In other words, get advice from them. Execute judgment. Here's the advice that is given, the decisions that have been made. And now then execute that. Do it. Let's, just as an aside and a lesson that we can learn from this in particular, it's good to get advice, right? It's better to get good advice. And the problem is that a lot of times what we do, instead of actually getting advice, is to seek confirmation of what we want to do. Think about Rehoboam, son of Solomon. And you recall at Solomon's death, the people come and they plead with Rehoboam, make our taxes lighter, and we'll serve you. And you remember what Rehoboam did? He sought counsel or advice, didn't he? He first went to the old men. They told him, basically, do what the people say and they'll follow you from now on. That was the good advice. Did he really want that advice? Obviously not, because he didn't like it, and he goes to the young people who grew up with him, and they told him, or you tell the people that the taxes that your father imposed upon them is going to be, you're going to make it so much more. And while he chastised you with whips, I'm going to chastise you with scorpions. Well, that's what he tells them, though. What did that lead to? A division in the nation. Did Rehoboam, ask a question, did Rehoboam really seek the advice of the old men? He wasn't seeking advice either time. He was wanting someone to agree with him, to give confirmation to what he wanted to do. Just make a modern day application, because we've seen this time and time again. Someone calls up the preacher on the phone and they have a question about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And of course, it's always a friend, someone that they know that's in this situation. And if you give them a Bible answer, well, that's really not what they wanted to hear, so they're going to call up another one. And they'll keep calling until they find someone to give them the answer that they wanted to hear, which is basically contrary to what the Bible says. And generally, it really doesn't matter the situation that you're in. You can stay there and everything will be all right. Of course, we've got plenty who teach that type of doctrine today. They're not seeking advice. They're seeking confirmation of what they want to do. Now then, that's the opposite of what Isaiah is counseling Moab to do. But I think it is a good lesson that we need to learn. We need to seek advice, yes, but we need to seek good advice. That is advice that's based upon God's Word. And then we need to execute it. My mind keeps going back to Israel as they were taking the land of Canaan. After the situation first at Jericho, and then Ai. You remember what happens next?
They have the Gibeonites come on the scene.
Okay, the Gibeonites come on the scene. They fake that they had been on a long journey, that their land is far away, and they want to make a treaty with Israel. Israel makes the treaty with them. After they find out, God tells them, you didn't ask counsel of me. God could have warned them about not making that treaty, but they didn't ask God. That's seeking good advice. They didn't seek good advice. They acted on their own without asking God.
Those things we learned from that, they had to go by what they had agreed to. So that would have been wrong if they didn't.
Well, that would be another aspect of it. They had to, and they did go by what the agreement that they made with them. When we make an agreement to our hurt, and I think that's kind of the way in which the psalmist puts it. I believe it's in the 15th Psalm. Swears to his hurt. You have to live by it. Reminds me of a story, supposedly a true one. I didn't live back in that time frame, but when oil was found in the North Texas area, a man was away, did not know about all of this, and someone comes up and offers him about 3 times what his farm was worth, so he sold it. A little bit later that day, someone else comes up to him and offers him about 10 times more than what he had just sold it for. Now, a lot of people would have weaseled out of the first agreement so that they could take the second agreement. But he swore to his own hurt. He was faithful to that first agreement. Sometimes we make agreements that aren't the best. We need to live up to them. We should always live up to our word. They did on that occasion. Okay, Dale.
Also says in Ecclesiastes 5:1-7 that if you make a vow that you should, especially to God, that you should not defer or postpone to fulfill it.
That would be included in what we say. We should always keep our word. Christ put it, let your yea be yea, your nay, nay. In other words, you always do what you say. But that all goes back to seeking counsel, seeking the right counsel, and then doing it. And here, Isaiah tells Moab, seek counsel of Judah. When you get advice from them, do it. Execute the judgment or the decision that has been made. The request, make thy shadow as the night in the midst of the noonday, hide the outcast, bewray not him that wandereth. That's the request, basically, for Judah to extend her care and protection over Moab, to hide Moab from the enemy, and not to betray them. So the request for Judah to make its shadow as clear, or at clear midday, dark as midnight, so that he who conceals, or who is concealed in the shadow, shall be hid as completely as if the darkness of night enclosed him, is the way in which one commentator put it. So even though it's daylight, you hide them as if it's the darkest of midnight, so that they can't be seen.
Does that kind of have echoes of them hiding in David's lifetime, hiding down in that well? And they had those two, I vaguely remember what happened. It makes me kind of reminds me of that. And they were concealing I can't remember the characters either, but I used to know the story real well. You know, when they were in that well, when they were having problems in the war in the land, and Absalom had rebelled.
I don't know what you're talking about, Dale, so I'm not going to even try and comment as to whether it thinks about it. It very simply is, you hide them in such a way where they cannot be found. Hide them from the enemy. Now then, think of Judah, though. They're hiding Moab against an enemy of Moab. Is that very... well, let me just say, is that very smart? If the enemy is pursuing and destroying Moab, and another nation over here is trying to hide them out, then what does that nation that's trying to destroy Moab, what's their thought going to be? Okay, destroy them too. So basically, it's a dangerous situation on the part of Moab, or on the part of Judah. But yet, Moab, you make the request. Even though it might, yes, invoke the anger of this aggressive nation, or this nation that's coming upon you. Verse 4. Let mine outcast dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a convert to them from the face of the spoiler. For the extortioner is at an end, the spoiler ceaseth, the oppressors are consumed out of the land. Moab was not only to ask for protection, but they were also to basically offer protection. What Isaiah is basically telling them is that in the future, Judah is going to need protection. Now, they are to protect you now, but later on, you're supposed to return the favor and protect them. So when they need the protection, you offer the protection for them. Someone turn over to Jeremiah chapter 40 and read verse 11.
Likewise, when all the Jews who were in Moab, among the Ammonites and Edom, and who were in all the countries, heard that the king of Babylon had left the remnant of Judah, and that he had set over them Gedaliah the son of Jehoiakim, the son of Phinehas.
Yeah, that's good enough. That gets us the point. Here's Nebuchadnezzar. He's come to destroy.
I found that verse.
Okay, well, you can keep it to yourself for now. We've passed it. Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar has come. They're destroying the land and Jerusalem. And the people of Jerusalem have fled to, here it says, Moab, Ammon, or the Ammonites, and Edom. Gives those three countries in particular. So now then, they have fled from Nebuchadnezzar, and here in Jeremiah 40 and verse 11, they've heard that Nebuchadnezzar has set up another ruler, a governor in Jerusalem, who was Gedaliah. Now then, here's those, though, that were in getting protection in Moab from Nebuchadnezzar, along with surrounding nations. So, you seek protection from Judah at this time. Later on, you offer protection. The opposing nation, or the oppressing nation, here referred to for the extortioner, is at an end. The extortioner would be this oppressing nation. The idea is that they are swept away from the land basically on the side of Jordan. Jerusalem would not be subject to it now. The spoiler ceaseth. They're not subject to that oppression at this time. The oppressors are consumed out of the land. They've been taken forth. So, while the oppressing nation has been swept away from the land on the side of Jordan, Jerusalem was not subject to it now, but has come forth even more glorious out of all of her oppressions than she ever did before. That's the idea, that the oppressors are consumed out of the land. They've come forth out of this in a glorious way. The devastation that was in Jerusalem has ended. The spoiler ceaseth. They're no longer spoiling Jerusalem. That's ended. Now then, in verse 5, we'll start on this. We're not going to get very far in verse 5, but in verse 5, and in mercy shall the throne be established, and he shall sit upon it in truth in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking judgment and hastening righteousness. With the disappearance of the oppressor in verse 4, there is a throne that's going to be established. Now then, Isaiah is going to now discuss that messianic throne, that messianic kingdom. And the point that we'll end with as far as tonight, and then pick up here, Lord willing, next week, is that Moab would be able to share in this messianic prophecy or promise. The messianic promise to Israel would include more than Israel. Who does it include? Well, here Moab. But there's the extension that we see as we go into the New Testament, that is extended to all nations. And thus the Great Commission, go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. There's that worldwide nature of the messianic promise. Dale?
The tabernacle of David is mentioned.
We'll get to that next week, okay? Because we'll talk about each of these aspects. But here, in particular, I wanted to mention the aspect of the worldwide nature of the Messianic kingdom. It is a promise of that in this regard. Now then, think of this. I have difficulty with the Israelites a lot of times along this line. And I say a problem with, I don't understand their thinking. They knew promises like this, along with many others. And yet, when Peter takes the gospel to Cornelius in Acts the 10th chapter, what do? Chapter 11. Well, they don't really reject him. They challenge Peter for taking the gospel to them. Why would you go there? He's a Gentile. Well, what about the promise here? That in this messianic kingdom, it's going to be for the Moabites as well. He's showing that it's not something that's going to be limited to the Israelites. Of course, didn't they know the promise to Abraham that in thee shall the Israelites be blessed? Well, yeah, all nations, wasn't it? Why did they think it would be limited just to them? That's the difficulty I have. And then, let me just end with this aspect. They have a mindset in that way, and they approach the scriptures with their mindset. Do we do the same thing today? And approach the scriptures with a certain mindset that it's this way, when in reality it's not. I say we'll stop at that point and pick up, Lord willing, with verse 5 next week.